Mr. Jefferson, I've read a lot about your views on states' rights and how strongly you feel about the subject. But what would your take be if a state passed a law and the Attorney General in the United States government, the federal government, doesn't support that law and tells you that you may not enforce that law? We have an issue in our time involving transgender bathrooms, and a state insisting that a birth certificate is the designation of gender for purposes of using a bathroom. The federal government doesn't agree with that.
Pardon my ignorance, but what?
No, let's not get into that.
Oh, so then just to the essential issue then.
Yes.
Well, if a law that a state passes is involved specifically in international diplomacy, warfare, trade with foreign nations, then those authorities are given to the federal government, all the states gather together as one. So we are in Fraunces Tavern. The New York Trespass Act abridged a confederated treaty with England. But the state Supreme Court of New York was the one that said, well, that was unconstitutional, and so the New York Trespass Act and Rutgers v. Waddington didn't hold its own. It was then deemed not constitutional, but by the state. In other cases, though, where there is no specific connection with international diplomacy or warfare, international trade, well, then the rights of passing those laws belong to the states, and the federal government doesn't have the right to interfere at all.
You can't possibly agree with that,
Well,
Mr.
of course not. You cannot deny the fundamental right, the responsibility of the federal government to ensure the happiness of its society, which overreaches more than simple warfare and commerce. So it is a matter of ensuring that the federal government takes responsibility for the individual states' properties and rights and essential needs, more than simply to let the state run havoc and have some sort of mob rule as their own means of governing.
And yet, even though I agree that the Constitution is, of course, the supreme law of the land, it is the supreme law of the land only in those cases that are specifically given to it, those powers specifically delegated to it in the Constitution. In every other case that is not delegated to the federal government, it is the territory of the state governments to enforce the constitutionality of laws and to call the federal government on whether or not it oversteps its powers.
The state governments, in ratifying the Constitution, gave the federal government the authority to declare what was necessary for the federal government to govern.
I completely disagree. The federal government wasn't given the right to declare what is and is not constitutional. That would then make the federal government the judge of its own limits of power and not the Constitution. No, sir, whenever the federal government oversteps its bounds, the states have a duty to step in and defend their rights.
Yes,
excuse me, Mr. President, but John Marshall has an opinion about and a definition for what is necessary and proper. And what is necessary is what is appropriate in order for Congress to act.
Yes, what is necessary, but not that which is merely convenient. But let us look at these sedition acts. The Sedition Act, the Alien Act, what about them? They were not necessary. They were mere enforcements of opinion.
They were necessary for the continuation of our government in a time when the hold of our country was being questioned because people were trying to destroy parties or presidents simply to promote their own agenda. To protect the country was the essence of the sedition law. It was not a matter of anything more than ensuring that the freedom of speech did not mean freedom from prosecution for telling lies.
That power, though, does not lie in the hands of the federal government. Yes, sedition, liable, they must be prosecuted, but Constitution does not give that power to the federal government, only to the states.
Well, I have to side with Mr. Jefferson on that. I mean, the Constitution is very clear. It says Congress shall make no law abridging freedom of speech. Yet, you signed the Alien and Sedition Act.
I did indeed, sir. The Sedition Act is not guaranteeing freedom from accountability for your actions. Mr. Jefferson agrees with me, I dare say, that printing a lie does not excuse you from responsibility for that lie.
Basic law, that is Blackstone, I agree with you completely.
Precisely.
However, once the federal government takes on that authority, it is overstepping its bounds. The states have the authority to prosecute against libel, against lies, not the federal government. That's why the states had the right to step in and defend themselves in 1798 against your Sedition Act.
They had the right to speak their mind, but they did not have the right to submit to the possibility of secession and anarchy by your supposed resolution for Kentucky, saying that if a state does not like the federal government's approach, then they have the right to ignore it and to walk away from it, sir. You are sponsoring a chaos which cannot subsist in this country, sir. You know as well as I do the dangers of mob rule, and you realize as well as anyone else, sir, that states left to their own devices without a strong central government could descend into chaos, and to allow that sort of anarchy, sir, I cannot abide by it.
Well, perhaps we can look at the Kentucky resolutions as an early draft of the idea, but it was never taken up in conversation by the rest of the states, so we never had a chance to hone those ideas.
I suppose that should tell you something right there, that it was not taken up by the people. It was chastised more than it was approved.
Well, there are many good ideas that are not taken up by the people. Even so, I continue to believe that the states are an important anchor that keeps the federal government from washing away in the tides of power that can be so easily used to usurp the power that belongs to the people.
And the federal government is a fine net which keeps those states from escaping off into their own peril in the sea, sir.
I prefer the boisterous sea of liberty to the calm of despotism, sir.
Well, I fear that your versions of the sea and mine are slightly different, sir.
Perhaps they are.
Well, Mr. Adams and Mr. Jefferson, this has been a great conversation, and having that conversation here in the Long Room of Fraunces Tavern is very, very special, and will be very, very special to everyone who has the opportunity to view this. So thank you for appearing here and for making the long journey from your respective states to what was once our nation's capital, New York City.
It's my pleasure, sir.
Indeed, mine as well. Yes.